So it was with the last rainstorm that we got to see how much water was actually flowing down this section on the southwestern portion of our property. We've got the bigger machinery to do some of the earthworks that I did have planned out on the southwestern portion. So since this is the edge of our property, we're going to be doing some really big earthworks and really big basins and water retention techniques. What's going on, everyone? I'm Brandon, and this is the Greening the Desert project. For those that are new to the channel, welcome. We're here on our permaculture desert homestead here in northern Arizona. We're just coming to the end of the monsoon season here, but it was with the last rainstorm that we were able to see a whole lot of how our south side of our property, what makes it so bare, and we can see the intensity of the water flow that comes down, washing away a lot of sediment, moving gravel and rocks at the same time, and creating a muddy mess. So it's been these last 2 weeks that it's been pretty hot and pretty dry. But the last week I was helping out my neighbor and we were able to finish up what he needed to get done. And so he brought over his bigger tractor or bigger excavator to help us out with a few of the more major and more significant earthworks that we were doing here. Seeing all the water that was flowing on our south end of our property here and seeing that it needed a whole lot of help just because of the lack of trees, the lack of grass. You know, nothing is growing. It's very sandy here. And with it being that we needed materials for the gabion wallapini, I actually needed to come to some of these areas over here to start collecting rocks. So coming over here to these certain areas where we were planning the earthworks to gather the rocks that I needed to continue stacking, and then looking at that this is the edge of our property here. And coming to the edge of our property, it's our last chance to capture as much of the water as we can. So as with the viewer's question, looking at, how to determine the depth of the earthworks that we're doing. And I'll say for at least what we're doing and the planning that we have, we still have a whole lot to do. We've got about 10 acres to cover here. So we haven't even scratched the surface with maybe about 5 acres at the most, I think, spanning out of earthworks. But at the least, now we're gathering the materials we need for the build, but also we now have in place these bigger basins and bigger catchment ponds. And it's with our overall plan that since this is the edge, that these are probably going to be deeper than a whole lot of our other basins. And that does determine a little bit of how deep we do a lot of our earthworks. So the farther we go up our hill or farther up our property, we still have a varying amount of earthworks to do. We still have a lot of smaller earthworks to do in between some of our bigger earthworks even. So there's a whole plan out here that we haven't even scratched the surface yet and we still have to get to. And that's been part of the strategy actually with doing the build as well as doing all of the different earthworks. It's really only important that we're doing a lot of these earthworks so that we have material for the build. So we're doing a lot of these earthworks even in the first place to get our build going and to finish, but also to interconnect with everything else. So now that we've dug out these bigger basins, this at the very least, if we aren't able to get to a lot of the other earthworks by next year, by the next monsoon season at least, we'll still be able to capture, harvest, and store a whole lot more water, but also keeping a lot more water on our property in general too now. And it was even more exciting, the fact that yesterday, while I'm doing some filming and collecting rocks and such, we did get a nice little rainstorm, kind of spur of the moment. It's pretty interesting how the clouds kind of had pushed away and then they kind of came back a certain way. And we definitely got a pretty decent downpour. And I definitely wasn't too sure what it was going to do. It started as a little bit of a drizzle and then it kind of stopped for a minute and then it started coming down a little bit harder. Probably hasn't rained for a little over a week and a half. So now it's nice to see this cloud that's just been hovering over us the last 30 minutes and it's dropping enough water where we're starting to get some sheet flow. So we're kind of near our catchment basin. It's a little windy, but this is also close to the gabion wallapini. And then we've got our nice rock terrace. We've got a basin in front. And we've also got a swale with a slight basin indent. This is kind of a major culmination point of where water's flowing from and such. So we can even see right here, a lot of water just starts right here and flows all down this. And now we're filling up a basin. We're still in our little commons area. And this is directly south from the gabion wallapini here. So we're towards the south end of our property. We can see we did a little bit of a contour swale here that's collecting and bringing water this way. And then that overfill is coming over here to this part where this box got blown over. You can see we've filled up. Got a lot of this water being diverted into that swale, so all this area will get flooded out. All this area here will get flooded out. Then the overfill of it, if I get the box out of the way, the overfill right here comes up and through the rocks. And then comes, and look at that, we've got a nice filled Zuni bowl. And as quickly as it came, we're traveling more southwest on our property. You can see we've started gathering up a lot of that water just from that rain, just from that nice little burst, and how everything started sheet flowing. So we at least have held water back here now, which will flow underground and gradually make its way down to water the landscape. And then we can see a little bit where a lot of this water is coming from, and then we're directing it to our basin here as quickly as it leaves. But this is nice, part of the rock swale that I started building, and the results are already in. Instant gratification. So we still have more to do on this contour line to build it up. So this will be somewhat of kind of just one big rock swale for holding and slowing water and letting it soak in. But there won't be any plants necessarily growing, I think, on some parts, because this will be a driving portion for the four-wheeler and such. So we just need to make sure that we have access to a lot of these different points of our earthworks and just the different parts of our property. Super important that we don't want to box ourselves in. But we can see all that water that comes down this way that we can now direct towards our giant basin back there. But we'll also be doing lots of other earthworks in between, and just other little tinier earthworks that'll help slow and stop the water and help it pool up in a lot of the areas. And it's going to be super important to actually expand on all parts of our property. This is kind of an untouched area. I've looked at it a few times, but haven't scoped out to see if there's really any adjustments that need to be made. But there's definitely a lot of earthworks we still need to do around over here, especially seeing all of this pooling. So then this is an untouched area as well that really haven't been able to watch, but now we can see a little bit more how the water travels and where it's really gathering up and depositing sediment and organic material. But then we can just make our adjustments on our plot plan map and just make sure that what we have on there is going to work. Otherwise, we'll just have to make some adjustments. And you can see a lot of these spots where we've taken rocks out and the water is pooling in. So it's nice to be able to see even some of these gathering points where this has been made into a naturally water slowing area with all the rocks. And we see the puddling. But then we can also see the abundance of grass that actually sits over here and equate it exactly with the water and how it's behaving with the landscape, and understand more of why these grasses grow here. And that can give us the example of what we need to be kind of going forward towards or in the direction of. Wow, just from that little rain. Starting to walk pretty much north of our property, on the border of our neighbor's property. We've kind of got our driveway path here, and it's nice to see this thing fill up again. It's our nice rolling dip that basically stops all the water coming up the way. We have more stopping points and check dams and all that stuff to do to further stop and slow the water. But for all the stuff that we've kind of chiseled out, just lightly outlined everywhere, everything is at least starting to slow more water down. And we can see the evidence right here. But this spot's got two different overflow points, so we're looking at over here is an overflow, and then over here is an overflow. And once it gets over to this side even, then it has to travel through the rocks, back over, and to the other side. So this point is a little bit higher, so when the water gets really full, then it'll start overfilling right here. And then we've plucked a lot of the rocks to build up this little rock rolling dip. And you can see all the little pockets we've created from pulling those rocks out, helping to slow and soak more water. We're over by the old build site. We've got all these puddles. We've got one of our basins that filled up with some water. Super cool to see. Even though that wasn't, that was just like almost a lighter drizzle that just kind of carried on for a good minute. And we can see our rolling dip that's leading to the build site. So we've got all this that's being held back, and all these pockets of water. It's something interesting to consider, because while I'm looking at a lot of these water veins and just how the water has carved out our landscape around here, it's interesting to look at the aspect of what has been the record amount of rainfall in this specific area. And I think that that's going to be something for us to at least observe over the next few years, to kind of see what kind of rainfall we can expect, and even if there is a chance of getting that 2-inch rain. And what I'm seeing almost is that that was the maximum amount of rain and intensity of just how all of the water was flowing on the property, getting to see just how it matched up with a lot of the different veins and the dips in our landscape. I could almost assume slightly that that's the maximum amount, but we definitely could get more than that, more than 1/2 of an inch, maybe more than an inch. Who knows? It could be sporadic in the time frame, over the years, so we'll have to see on that. But because I think that the amount of earthworks that we're going to be doing here, especially in our southern portion of our property, it's very bare, so it's going to need a lot of help to keep all that water from flushing away. And that's going to amount to different earthworks, varying depths and widths of earthworks to help disperse, soak, and spread a lot of that water more. But it's in my opinion, and from my experience at least, that having bigger earthworks or deeper earthworks towards the end of our properties, I think that's the best outcome. Even if it's something that you start out on, that's something that it's on the edge of your property, so any of the water that does come down the way, this is going to be a gathering point where we'll at least stop and slow and soak a lot more of it. And then as we build up more of the earthworks around here, those will be further stopping and slowing points, so that all of our bigger basins down here will be essentially just the overfill from all of the other overfills. And we also have our other rain catchment basin that can hold up to 14,000 gallons that we are directing a lot of our earthworks towards that basin. So we'll have multi-gathering points of water storage and water soakage, along with all the swales and the tree planting systems with the rock check dams as well, and the Zuni bowls. It's been pretty exciting the last few months, but it's also exciting to see that we're over halfway on the gabion baskets, at least for stacking the rocks and doing the rammed earth portion. So we've got a lot coming after that, but we're going to be continuing to stack rocks, getting our next level up, getting our ties that are going to be a little bit different than the metal ties because we need to be able to attach wood and shelving and other stuff in here eventually. I've also still got to attach the wood support posts in between these before we stack the rocks too high as well. Take a guess what these are for.